The Galactic High Command had many ways of telling a soldier they were not exactly their favorite person. They could reassign you to a desk. They could make you audit supply manifests for 6 months. Or, if they really wanted to send a message, they could post you to Veltharion 9. Cadet Remy Holt got Veltharion 9. Remy was 26, human, and possessed of the specific kind of calm that made authority figures deeply uncomfortable. Not because he was rebellious, not because he caused trouble, but because no matter what was thrown at him, Remy Holt looked at it, processed it, and then responded with the energy of a man who had already decided that things would probably be fine. This was, to most alien species in the Galactic Coalition, completely unreadable behavior. And unreadable behavior made people nervous. Commander Zorvac, a 7-foot Grellian with 4 arms and the disposition of someone who had never once in his life experienced an emotion he could not immediately categorize, delivered the assignment personally. He had expected protest. He had expected negotiation. He had prepared specifically for the human tendency to complain loudly about fairness. Instead, Remy looked at the assignment hologram, nodded slowly and said, "Cool. Does the shuttle have decent Wi-Fi?" Zorvac stared at him for 4 full seconds. "The planet," Zorvac said carefully, "has a Class 7 biohazard rating." Said Remy. 3 species have requested hazard compensation simply for entering its orbit. Right. The surface temperature fluctuates between acidic fog and thermal venting every 6 hours. Remy picked up his assignment chip. "So layers. Got it." Zorvac opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You are not concerned." Remy looked up at him with the patient expression of someone explaining something obvious. "Commander, I grew up in New Jersey. I think I can handle a little fog." He shouldered his kit bag and walked out. Zorvac stood alone in the briefing room for a long moment, staring at the door. Then he filed a supplementary note in Remy's personnel file that read simply, "Worrying. Reason unclear." It was, as it turned out, the most accurate thing anyone had ever written about Remy Holt. The shuttle touched down on Veltharion 9 with a sound like a tin can being kicked down a stairwell, which Remy chose to interpret as a good sign. The landing ramp descended. The air hit him immediately. It smelled like someone had set fire to a chemical plant inside a swamp, then asked a sulfur mine to consult on the project. Remy stood at the top of the ramp, took a long, slow breath, and said, "Yep, there it is." Unit 7 rolled up beside him. Unit 7 was a briefing droid, Mark IV series, designed to deliver mission-critical information in a calm, professional manner. It had been stationed on Veltharion 9 for 8 months, and something about that experience had given its voice a very specific quality. The quality of someone who had made peace with the void. "Welcome to Veltharion 9, Unit 7 said. Current atmosphere, mildly corrosive. Visibility 40% due to spore fog. Local fauna threat level, extinction class. Please note that your life insurance policy does not cover shadow stalker incidents, as they are classified under, quote, foreseeable negligence." Remy stepped off the ramp. Foreseeable negligence. Nice. "I am required to deliver the shadow stalker briefing," Unit 7 continued, rolling after him across the gray, crunching ground. "Shadow stalkers are apex ambush predators native to Veltharion 9. Average body length, 2.4 meters. They are venomous, communal hunters with a predator IQ ranking in the top 3% of catalogued species. They are invisible in low-light conditions due to a chromatophore-based camouflage system that even our best sensor arrays struggle to detect." "Huh," said Remy, looking around with his hands in his jacket pockets. "In the last 40 years, Unit 7 pressed on. Shadow stalkers have been responsible for the complete evacuation of 2 research stations, the early retirement of 1 admiral, and the deletion of an entire Xenobiology sub-department that shall not be named for legal reasons." "How many confirmed kills?" Unit 7 paused. "The number is considered classified to avoid, and I am quoting directly from the memo, quote, unnecessary existential distress in field personnel." Remy nodded. "So a lot, a significant lot," Unit 7 confirmed. Remy set his kit bag down at the edge of the prefab base camp, looked out at the dark, fog-wrapped tree line, and was quiet for a moment. Unit 7 prepared itself to log Cadet Holt's first recorded expression of fear or concern. It had been waiting for it since the shuttle. "Are they social?" Remy asked. Unit 7 processed the question, then processed it again, then said, I beg your pardon? The Shadow Stalkers. Communal hunters, you said. So they operate in groups. That means there's social structure, hierarchy, probably. Communication. He tilted his head. Are they social? Unit 7's internal fan spun up slightly higher than normal. They are predators. That's not what I asked. They have not been studied at close range for reasons that should be, Unit 7 said, with what could only be described as a brittle quality, extremely obvious. Remy picked his kit bag back up and walked toward the base camp. Okay, I'm going to get set up. Wake me if anything tries to eat the generator. And if something tries to eat you? Remy glanced back over his shoulder. Then I guess I'll wake myself up. Unit 7 watched him go. It then sent a brief, unprompted status report to Galactic High Command that said only, Cadet has arrived. Recommend monitoring. No one at High Command read it for 11 days. Night 1 on Veltharion 9 arrived fast and mean. The fog thickened, the lights dropped, and everything outside the base camp became a whole lot of dark nothing. Remy sat outside on a supply crate, eating a field ration that tasted like cardboard, had argued with a protein shake, and neither had won. Unit 7 had strongly recommended he go inside. Remy had said in a bit 40 minutes ago and had not moved since. That was when the Shadow Stalker appeared. 1 second there was nothing. The next there were 2 enormous amber eyes hovering in the dark about 3 meters away, attached to something very large that the fog was helpfully concealing. Unit 7, watching from behind a supply container, initiated its emergency log and began composing what it privately considered a very dignified final report. Remy looked at the eyes. The eyes looked at Remy. He looked down at his field ration. He broke off a piece. He held it out. The Shadow Stalker did not move. Yeah, I know, Remy said quietly. It's not great, but it's what I've got. 3 full minutes passed. Then, with the slow, suspicious movement of a creature that had never once been confused in its life and was deeply unhappy about starting now, the Shadow Stalker leaned forward and sniffed the ration bar. Then it ate it. Then it sat down. Remy nodded like this was a reasonable development and ate the rest of his dinner in companionable silence. Unit 7 stayed behind the container for another 20 minutes before it felt safe enough to roll out, look at the scene, and quietly delete its final report. It filed a new one instead. It said, Incident occurred, category unknown, further observation required. Then it added a personal note it would never send to anyone. I do not understand humans. I have never understood humans. I begin to suspect I never will. By day 3, there were 3 of them. Remy had named the first one Biscuit, on account of the ration bar. The second one showed up the following morning, larger than Biscuit, with a scar running across its left flank and the general attitude of someone who managed a difficult department. Remy called it Sergeant. The third arrived mid-afternoon on day 3, smaller than the other 2, visibly younger, and possessed of a curiosity so intense it kept creeping closer to the base camp equipment and then startling itself. Remy named that one Gremlin, which felt accurate. Unit 7 documented all of this with the energy of a droid who had taken a long, hard look at its career choices. The Shadow Stalkers did not attack. They did not posture. What they did, which was somehow more unsettling to Unit 7 than any aggression would have been, was simply hang around. They moved through the camp perimeter with a loose, unhurried confidence, like tenants who had decided the lease terms were acceptable. They slept in a cluster near the eastern supply wall during the hottest part of the day, when the thermal venting made the ground too warm for comfortable movement. In the evenings, they sat near wherever Remy happened to be sitting. Remy, for his part, treated the whole arrangement like it was completely ordinary. He established a feeding routine by day 4, not out of any grand strategic thinking, but because Biscuit had started showing up at the same time each evening, and Remy was, at his core, a creature of habit who respected the same quality in others. He rationed out portions from his field supplies with the careful economy of someone who had done the math and figured he could make it work. Unit 7 pointed out once that he was depleting his rations faster than the resupply schedule accounted for. Remy said, "I'll put in a request." He did not put in a request. By the end of the first week, something more interesting had started happening. The Shadow Stalkers were not just tolerating Remy, they were, in the specific and unmistakable way of social predators, integrating him into their structure. Biscuit, who Remy had correctly identified as the pack's primary hunter, had begun bringing things back to camp. Not ration bars, actual prey. Small, armored creatures native to the veltharion undergrowth that the briefing database listed as, ironically, hazardous to approach. Biscuit would drop them at the edge of camp, with the calm satisfaction of someone contributing to a shared household. Remy would nod appreciatively. This went on every other day like clockwork. Sergeant, meanwhile, had apparently decided that perimeter security was a shared responsibility. Remy noticed on day 6 that whenever he walked the camp boundary during his evening checks, Sergeant shadowed him at a distance of about 4 meters, moving through the fog in near silence, pausing when Remy paused, turning when Remy turned. It was, functionally, a patrol. Remy started timing his rounds to a consistent schedule. Sergeant matched it without being asked. Gremlin was a different situation entirely. Gremlin had discovered the equipment cases, not in a destructive way, in a deeply investigative way. Gremlin would sit in front of a sealed case, study it, nudge it, walk around it, study it again from the new angle, and then sit back down with the expression of someone who was building a theory. Remy caught Gremlin attempting to mimic the motion of him opening a latch on day 8. He watched for a full minute before deciding the responsible thing to do was not to encourage this, and then immediately showed Gremlin how the latch worked because he was curious how long it would take to figure it out. 4 days, as it turned out. Unit 7 filed 17 incident reports over the course of those 2 weeks. The reports were detailed, increasingly agitated in tone, and entirely accurate. They covered the feeding arrangement, the patrol integration, the latch situation, and a particularly thorough account of the afternoon Remy fell asleep outside and woke up with all 3 Shadow Stalkers arranged around him in what Unit 7 could only clinically describe as a protective formation. Galactic High Command received all 17 reports. They were automatically routed to a processing queue. The processing queue forwarded them to a sub-department. The sub-department noted that no existing incident category covered the described events and parked them in a miscellaneous archive folder with the intention of reviewing them later. No one reviewed them. Remy did not file any reports of his own. When Unit 7 asked him why, he looked up from the equipment manifest he was updating and said, with complete sincerity, "What would I even say? It's fine. Everything out here is fine." Unit 7's internal fan ran at elevated speed for the remainder of the afternoon. On day 14, Remy sat outside at his usual spot on the supply crate, eating his evening ration with Biscuit on his left, Sergeant a few meters behind him, and Gremlin industriously attempting to open a case that Remy had deliberately left unlatched just to see what would happen. The fog was doing its usual thing. The sky above Veltharion 9, on the rare moments it was visible through the spore cloud, was a deep and genuinely beautiful shade of violet. Remy looked at it for a while. "Not bad," he said, to no one in particular. Biscuit exhaled slowly through its nose, which Remy had come to understand over 2 weeks of close observation was the Shadow Stalker equivalent of agreement. Commander Zorvac had not personally conducted a field check in 4 years. He considered them beneath his rank, logistically inefficient and emotionally unrewarding. But something about those 17 archived incident reports, which a junior aide had accidentally forwarded to his personal terminal instead of the miscellaneous queue, had convinced him to make an exception. He read all 17 on the shuttle to Veltharion 9, twice. By the time the shuttle broke atmosphere, he had also requisitioned a full hazard team, filed a priority wellness check on Unit 7, and sent a terse 3-line message to Galactic High Command marked urgent that said, in its entirety, "The human cadet situation on Veltharion 9 requires immediate senior review. I am handling it personally. Please stand by." He had not elaborated, partly because he did not want to cause panic, mostly because he did not have words yet for what he had read and was hoping that, upon arrival, reality would turn out to be more sensible than the reports suggested. It was not more sensible. The shuttle touched down at midday during the thermal venting window, which meant the air was hot, hazy, and smelled aggressively of sulfur. Zorvac descended the ramp in full hazard-rated command gear, forearms held in the formal attention position, flanked by 2 armed escort officers who had also read the reports and were therefore holding their weapons with the specific tension of people who were not sure what they were supposed to point them at. The base camp looked orderly. That was the first surprise. Supply cases stacked neatly, equipment in good condition, perimeter markers intact. Whatever Remy Holt had been doing out here for 2 weeks, he had apparently also found time to run a tidy camp. The second surprise was Remy himself, who was sitting on a supply crate near the center of camp, drinking something hot from a metal cup, and who looked up at the arriving shuttle with the calm, unhurried expression of a man who had been expecting company and was in no particular rush about it. "Commander Zorvac," Remy said pleasantly. "Good timing. I just made coffee." Zorvac opened his mouth to deliver the formal check-in protocol and completely forgot it, because that was when he saw Biscuit. Biscuit was lying along the eastern supply wall, enormous and dark and only partially visible in the midday haze, amber eyes tracking the new arrivals with the slow, evaluating patience of an apex predator who had not yet decided whether the situation was interesting. The chromatophore camouflage was partially active, which meant Biscuit was less a solid shape and more a large, breathing suggestion of a shape, which was somehow worse than seeing it clearly. One of the escort officers made a sound that was not quite a word. "That," Zorvac said, very carefully, "is a shadow stalker." "That's Biscuit," Remy said. "That is a shadow stalker," Zorvac repeated, because he felt the clarification was important. "Yeah, Biscuit is a shadow stalker. You want coffee?" Zorvac did not want coffee. Zorvac wanted to understand what was happening. He looked at the shadow stalker. He looked at Remy. He looked back at the shadow stalker, which had at this point lost interest in him and was doing the slow, half-lidded blink that Remy had privately catalogued as the creature's resting expression. Then he looked at Unit 7, who had rolled to a position approximately equidistant between Remy and the shuttle ramp, which Zorvac recognized as the spatial decision of a droid that was keeping its options open. "Unit 7, Zorvac said. "Report." "I have filed 17 incident reports," Unit 7 said, with great dignity. "I consider my professional obligations fully discharged. How many shadow stalkers are present at this camp?" "Currently visible, 1. Currently on perimeter, 1. Current whereabouts of the third, unknown, which I want to stress is a condition I have made peace with." Zorvac processed this. "There are 3 of them." "There are 3 of them," Unit 7 confirmed. "And Cadet Holt has been." Zorvac paused, searching for language, "cohabitating with 3 shadow stalkers for 2 weeks. "Cohabitating is one word for it," Unit 7 said. "I have been using the phrase active interspecies domestic integration in my reports, as it felt more professional and also more accurately conveyed the scale of what I have been witnessing." Zorvac turned to Remy. Remy had finished his coffee and was now breaking a ration bar into pieces in a way that Zorvac recognized, with a creeping horror, as portioned feeding preparation. "Cadet Holt," Zorvac said in his most measured command voice. "Explain, from the beginning, slowly." Remy looked up. "Which part?" "All of it. Every part. Starting with why there is an apex extinction-class predator lying against my supply wall like it owns the property." "She kind of does, technically," Remy said. "This was their territory before the base camp went up. I figured the least I could do was not be weird about it." Zorvac stared at him. "You were concerned about being rude to the shadow stalkers." "I was concerned about being a bad neighbor," Remy corrected, as if this were a meaningful distinction. Before Zorvac could formulate a response to that, Sergeant materialized out of the fog at the perimeter edge. There was a collective sharp intake of breath from the escort officers, both of whom had now positioned themselves extremely close to the shuttle ramp. Sergeant moved through the camp with the slow, proprietorial ease of its usual patrol rhythm, clocked Zorvac and the new arrivals with a single long look, determined they were not a threat worth escalating over, and settled into its standard perimeter position about 6 meters out. It was the most terrifying display of calm Zorvac had ever witnessed. "It is," Zorvac said quietly, "doing a patrol." "Yeah, Sergeant runs the evening perimeter with me. We do 2 circuits. Remy checked the time. "Actually, we are a bit early today. Sergeant is probably wondering what is going on." "Sergeant," Zorvac repeated. "You named it Sergeant." There are 3 of them. I needed something to call them. Remy gestured vaguely. There is also Gremlin, but Gremlin is probably in the equipment bay right now. I left the east case unlatched. Zorvac slowly turned to look at the equipment bay. From somewhere inside it came a distinct, deliberate clicking sound, the sound of a latch being operated. The escort officer on the left made the not quite a word sound again. Zorvac made a command decision. He pulled out his comm unit, opened a direct channel to Galactic High Command, and said in a flat, controlled voice, "This is Commander Zorvac. I need a senior Xenobiology team, 2 flag-level observers, and a diplomatic liaison dispatched to Veltharion 9 immediately. Priority level urgent. No, I cannot summarize the situation in a standard incident category. No, everyone is currently physically unharmed. That is the most reassuring thing I am able to tell you at this time." He closed the channel. Remy offered him the coffee again. This time Zorvac took it. He was not sure it would help, but he was very sure that standing on Veltharion 9, watching a 2-meter apex predator run a security patrol while another one operated equipment latches in the storage bay, was the kind of situation that at minimum deserved a hot drink. The Xenobiology team arrived 36 hours later. They came in 2 shuttles with sensor arrays, containment protocols, 4 layers of hazard gear each, and the collective professional confidence of people who studied dangerous alien fauna for a living and therefore felt they had seen most things. They had not seen this. The lead xenobiologist, a veteran Grelian researcher named Dr. Ovrak, who had published 47 papers on apex predator behavior, stepped off the shuttle, looked at the base camp, looked at Biscuit lying peacefully against the supply wall, looked at Remy standing next to Biscuit with a cup of coffee, and said nothing for a very long time. Then she turned to Zorvac and said, "Is that cadet aware that the shadow stalker behind him is in a relaxed submission posture?" Zorvac said, "I am not sure Cadet Holt is aware of much that the rest of us would consider relevant." Dr. Ovrak walked slowly toward Remy, keeping her sensor array between herself and Biscuit in a way she probably thought was subtle. "Cadet, how did you establish initial contact?" "I gave her a ration bar," Remy said. Dr. Ovrak blinked. "You fed it. First night. She showed up, looked hungry. I had extra." "She showed up," Dr. Ovrak repeated carefully. "A shadow stalker showed up, and you interpreted that as hunger. She was watching me eat. That usually means something wants food." Dr. Ovrak looked at her sensor array. She looked at Biscuit. She looked at the readings, which were showing a stress profile so low it bordered on recreational. She had 47 published papers on apex predator behavior. She was fairly certain she was going to need to write a 48th, and that it was going to be the strangest thing she had ever put her name on. The 2 admirals arrived the following morning. Then the diplomatic liaison, who had brought a universal translator loaded with 40 languages and was deeply unhappy to discover it was not going to be relevant. By the time the full assembly had gathered at the base camp, Veltharion 9 had more senior Galactic Coalition personnel on its surface than it had seen in its entire recorded history. Biscuit slept through most of it. Gremlin, who had now fully mastered 3 different latch types and was working on a 4th, occasionally paused to observe the new arrivals with bright, calculating eyes before returning to the latches. Sergeant ran its patrol, on schedule, as always, and Remy Holt sat in the middle of all of it, made enough coffee for everyone who wanted some, and answered questions with the patient, slightly puzzled energy of a man who genuinely did not understand why any of this was considered remarkable. "You were not afraid," one of the admirals said, studying him across the camp table they had set up for the preliminary debrief. "At any point during the 2 weeks, you were not afraid of them." Remy thought about it honestly. "I mean, the first night was a little tense, but you fed it anyway." "She looked like she was having a hard time," Remy said simply. "So yeah, I fed her." The admiral looked at him for a long moment. Then she wrote something in her report that she did not read aloud. Unit 7, positioned nearby, observed all of this and updated its own internal notes. It added one final line at the bottom of a document it had been quietly compiling for 2 weeks, a document it had titled, with uncharacteristic editorial flair, "The Holt Anomaly, Ongoing." The line read, "Subject continues to be completely inexplicable. Recommend observation continues indefinitely." Also recommend someone restocks his ration supply before he feeds the rest of those to the pack as well. The hearing room at Galactic High Command was designed to be intimidating. This was not accidental. The ceiling was deliberately high. The panel table was deliberately long. The lighting was deliberately angled so that whoever stood at the center podium was lit like someone about to receive bad news in a very official capacity. 7 senior officers sat behind the panel table, representing 7 different coalition species, all of whom had read the full report, the 17 incident logs, Dr. Ovrak's preliminary field notes, and a supplementary memo from Commander Zorvak that was 3 pages long and ended with the sentence, "I do not know what to tell you. I have included everything I observed. I am going to take some leave." Remy stood at the podium in his dress uniform, which he had ironed, mostly. He looked around the chamber with the calm, observational expression of someone taking in a new restaurant and deciding it was probably fine. The presiding admiral, a broad, silver-ranked Tuluvian named High Admiral Shreth, looked down at him from the center of the panel with the weight of someone who had presided over 40 years of coalition hearings and had never once needed to create a completely new procedural category mid-session. She was about to need to create one. "Cadet Holt," she began, in the resonant, measured tone of someone used to having a room's full attention. "You have been brought before this panel to account for the events of your 2-week posting on Veltharion 9, during which time you allegedly established an unsanctioned cohabitation arrangement with 3 Shadow Stalker predators, integrated one into active base security operations, allowed a second unrestricted access to coalition equipment, and failed to file a single incident report despite—" She paused and looked down at the documents. 17 being filed on your behalf by your assigned briefing unit. "Unit 7 is very thorough," Remy said. "That is not the point I am making." "Right, sorry." High Admiral Shreth studied him. "Do you understand the severity of what you did out there? Shadow Stalkers have never, in 40 years of coalition records, permitted approach by any non-native species. They have never demonstrated non-aggressive behavior toward coalition personnel. What you are describing, what the reports are describing, has no precedent, none. Do you understand that?" Remy nodded slowly. "I do understand that, yes. And what do you have to say for yourself?" Remy considered the question with genuine sincerity. "They were curious," he said. "They just needed someone to not run away." The chamber was quiet. High Admiral Shreth opened her mouth. And that was when the door opened. Not the main doors, the side service door, the one that led to the shuttle docking corridor, the one that was coded, locked, and accessible only to authorized maintenance personnel. That door opened with a soft, pressurized hiss, and through it walked Biscuit. Biscuit was fully visible in the chamber's bright lighting, which meant the full 2.4 meters of her was available for everyone present to appreciate simultaneously. The chromatophore camouflage was inactive. The amber eyes were calm. She walked with the unhurried, deliberate pace of someone who had looked up the address, found the place without difficulty, and was not particularly impressed by the decor. She crossed the chamber floor, claws clicking lightly on the polished surface, past the podium, and sat down next to Remy. Then she looked up at the panel. The panel looked back. For approximately 4 seconds, Galactic High Command said nothing. This was, by any historical measure, a record. Then the chamber erupted. 2 junior aides left their seats entirely. A senior officer on the far left of the panel activated a containment alert on reflex, realized mid-activation that he had no protocol for this specific situation, and cancelled it again. A diplomatic observer in the gallery made a sound that the universal translator rendered, after a brief hesitation, as, "What?" The containment team that had been stationed in the corridor outside, as a precaution, opened the main doors, saw Biscuit sitting calmly next to Remy, looked at each other, and quietly closed the doors again because nothing in their briefing had covered this. Remy looked down at Biscuit. "How did you even get here?" Biscuit blinked slowly, the slow, half-lidded blink, the resting expression. "She stowed away on the shuttle," said a voice from the gallery. It was Unit 7, who had apparently also made the trip and was now positioned near the back wall with the composed air of a droid attending an event it had always known was inevitable. "I observed her board during the pre-launch window. I considered filing a report." "Did you file one?" Remy asked. I decided to see how it played out, Unit 7 said, which was the most human sentence it had ever produced and which it would spend considerable processing time analyzing afterward. High Admiral Sreth had not moved. She was a 40-year veteran of the Coalition. She had negotiated 3 interspecies treaties, survived 2 military engagements, and once talked a rogue AI installation down from a full system overload, using nothing but procedural language and patience. She was, by any reasonable metric, unshakable. She looked at Biscuit. Biscuit looked at her. Biscuit yawned, displaying an impressive and fully detailed set of teeth, then settled her chin onto her front legs with the profound, boneless relaxation of an animal that was completely comfortable and had no plans to be otherwise. High Admiral Sreth looked at Remy. "Is it," she said carefully, "going to do anything?" "She's fine," Remy said. "She just wanted to see where I went." The High Admiral sat back in her chair. She looked at the panel to her left, then to her right. She looked at the reports in front of her. She looked at the 2.4-meter apex predator napping next to a human cadet in the middle of a Coalition hearing chamber. She picked up her formal proceedings stylus and set it back down. "Take 10 minutes, she said to the room, in the tone of someone who needed to have a very quiet internal conversation with themselves. The 10 minutes were not quiet. They were filled with urgent, overlapping discussions in 6 languages, 2 emergency subcommittee consultations conducted in the corridor, and Dr. Overak being called in from the waiting area to confirm on the record that what the panel was looking at was in fact a fully conscious, fully capable shadow stalker that was choosing of its own free will to sit next to Remy Holt like a very large, very dangerous dog waiting for its owner to finish an errand. Dr. Overak confirmed all of this. She also submitted, on the spot, a formal request to continue field observation of the situation, which was approved in record time because no one at the table wanted to be the person who said no to the xenobiologist while the shadow stalker was in the room. When the panel reconvened, High Admiral Sreth looked at Remy with the expression of someone who had made a decision and was going to commit to it fully. "Cadet Holt," she said, "this panel finds your conduct on Veltharion 9 to be irregular, unsanctioned, and entirely outside any existing Coalition operational framework." "Understood," Remy said. "It also finds your conduct to have produced an outcome of significant scientific, diplomatic, and strategic value to the Coalition, the full implications of which we are nowhere near equipped to assess at this time." Remy nodded. "You are therefore being issued a formal commendation for exceptional field initiative." She paused. "And a strongly worded operational directive to consult with command before engaging in any future interspecies contact of this nature." "Of course," Remy said. "And a promotion to junior field specialist, effective immediately." "Thank you, Admiral. And we are asking you," she said, leaning slightly forward, "very sincerely, and I want you to understand the sincerity here, to please not do this again without telling someone first." Remy looked at her with the open, earnest expression of a man making a promise he fully intended to honor. "Absolutely," he said. "You have my word." Biscuit lifted her head, looked at Remy and made a low sound in the back of her throat, a short, resonant rumble. Remy reached down without looking and rested a hand briefly on the top of her head. High Admiral Sreth watched this and made a note that she kept entirely to herself. The hearing concluded. The chamber cleared slowly, the way rooms clear when people are reluctant to stop watching something. Remy walked out with Biscuit at his side, nodded to the containment team in the corridor, who nodded back with the expressions of people who had given up on having a normal day, and made his way toward the docking bay. Unit 7 rolled alongside him. "You are already planning to do it again," it said. "Not a question. There are 14 other restricted fauna classifications in the Coalition database," Remy said pleasantly. "That seems like a lot of animals that nobody has tried being polite to yet." Unit 7 processed this. Its internal fan ran at elevated speed. Then it did something it had never done in 8 months of operation on Veltharion 9 or anywhere else. It fell into step beside him. "I am going to need," it said, with great resignation and what might in a droid pass for affection, a significantly larger incident report template. Remy smiled. Biscuit clicked her claws on the corridor floor, steady and unhurried, and somewhere in the Coalition database, 14 restricted fauna classifications had absolutely no idea what was coming.